He was the architect of a superpower, yet his hands were stained with the blood of millions. A man who ruled through fear, reshaped history, and turned his nation into a global force, but at an unimaginable human cost. Under Stalin's reign of terror, the Soviet Union underwent rapid industrialization and collectivization, transforming it into a global superpower. However, his rule was marked by brutal purges, mass executions, forced labor camps known as gulags, and widespread famine, particularly the Holodomor in Ukraine. His authoritarian control resulted in severe human rights abuses and mass repression. Who was Josef Stalin? A visionary leader or one of history's most ruthless tyrants? His name still echoes in history, a symbol of power, paranoia, and oppression. This is his story. Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Josef Vissarionovich Jukashvili was born on December 18, 1870 in Gori, Russian Empire, modern-day Georgia. He grew up in extreme poverty with an abusive alcoholic father, Vissarion Jukashvili, who frequently beat him. His mother, Kite Galadze, was a washwoman who cared for him, especially after he contracted smallpox as an infant, which left his face scarred for life. A childhood accident involving a horse-drawn carriage permanently damaged his left arm, exempting him from military service in World War I. Despite speaking only Georgian at home, Stalin learned Russian while attending the Gori Church School from 1888 to 1894. His mother wished for him to become an Orthodox priest, and he was sent to the Tiflis Theological Seminary. However, his exposure to Karl Marx and other revolutionary texts led to his expulsion in 1899, officially for ill health, but more than likely due to his radical activities. Stalin briefly worked as a clerk at the Tiflis Observatory, his only paid employment outside of politics. He soon became involved in an underground revolutionary movement, organizing labor demonstrations and strikes in the Caucasus. His excessive zeal in pushing workers into violent confrontations with the police alienated many fellow conspirators. By 1903, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party split into two factions, the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. Stalin joined the more militant Bolsheviks under Vladimir Lenin, becoming a key operative. Stalin married a Georgian woman, Ekaterina Svanidze, in 1904. She died 3 years later, leaving behind a son, Yakov, whom Stalin later treated with contempt. In 1907, he orchestrated a bank heist in Tbilisi to fund the party, marking his early involvement in criminal activities for political gain. Stalin's early years were defined by arrests, imprisonments, and exiles. Despite being arrested 7 times between 1902 and 1913, Stalin consistently received light sentences, leading some Bolsheviks to suspect that he was an informant for the Tsarist police. After escaping from Siberian in exile in 1917, Stalin returned to Petrograd and resumed editorship of Pravda. Initially advocating for cooperation with the provisional government, he quickly shifted to Lenin's militant stance, supporting the Bolshevik Revolution in October 1917 that overthrew the Romanov dynasty. However, Stalin played a secondary role to Leon Trotsky in the revolution. But during the Russian Civil War, in 1918 to 1921, between the Bolshevik Reds and the opposition Whites, hoping to remove Lenin's influence, Trotsky proved to be a capable commander, and the Bolsheviks eventually won. This placed Stalin in the shadow of his future primary rival. Following Lenin's death in 1924, Stalin outmaneuvered his rivals, including Trotsky, Zinoviev, and Kamenev. Lenin did not want Stalin to succeed him, but only those men were really aware of it. He consolidated power through strategic appointments and political purges, and created the Gulag system. See our video on Stalin's Cannibal Island on that subject. By the late 1930s, he had eliminated opposition and established a totalitarian regime. Friends and enemies both were sacrificed. And Trotsky, after exile, was assassinated in Mexico City in 1940. And see our video on Trotsky. Stalin's policies forcibly collectivized agriculture, seizing private farmland and placing peasants under state control. Resistance, especially in Ukraine, led to mass executions, deportations, and the Holodomor famine, which killed millions. Industrialization under successive five-year plans propelled the USSR into an industrial powerhouse, but at an immense human cost. Beginning in 1934, Stalin initiated widespread purges targeting Communist Party members, military leaders, and intellectuals. The Great Purges of 1936 to 1938 saw show trials, forced confessions, and executions of Stalin's former allies, including Zinoviev, Kamenev, and Bukharin. The Red Army suffered devastating losses, with approximately 75% of its officers purged. The greatest loss was Marshal Nikolai Tukhachevsky, Russia's greatest military genius, who had designed the Soviet military from top to bottom, organized a battle plan with contingencies using ground, air, and partisan assets in case of a future war. His loss would come back to haunt Stalin. Stalin signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Hitler in 1939, allowing the USSR to annex parts of Eastern Europe, and when Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, both nations divided that country. Soviet forces then occupied the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Stalin then took the opportunity to invade Finland in November 1939, a blunder which cost him 400,000 soldiers and ended in a truce in March 1940, giving him parts of Karelia, but it showed how deficient his military was. The poor performance of the Red Army in Finland showed the weaknesses Stalin had inflicted upon the military with his purges, but it foreshadowed an even greater disaster. In 1941, Stalin took over military operations, a job for which he was wholly unsuited, and Germany invaded the Soviet Union, catching Stalin off guard, despite him being warned by British intelligence that an attack was coming. The British had just broken the Enigma code. The Red Army's initial failures resulted in catastrophic losses. Stalin then executed 300 senior officers for incompetence by October 1941, though it was his own purges and poor decisions and ridiculous orders that had crippled the military's leadership. Seeing the brutality and incompetence of Stalin militarily, nearly 1 million Soviet citizens fled to German-occupied Eastern Europe. The largest contingent were Ukrainians, led by the anti-communist Stepan Bandera. Many joined the German military, which created 1 Ukrainian, 2 Russian, 2 Latvian, and 1 Estonian Waffen-SS division, as well as the 15th SS Cossack Cavalry Corps to fight Stalin. At the suggestion of Marshal Georgy Zhukov, Stalin brought back many of the generals he had sent to the gulags, those he did not kill, such as Konstantin Rokossovsky, a protege of Tukhachevsky who would save Moscow and plan Operation Bagration in 1944. Despite the early setbacks, with the reintroduction of competent field commanders, American Lend-Lease, and his massive industrial program, Soviet forces rebounded, winning crucial battles at Moscow, Stalingrad, and Kursk. Stalin later emerged as a key figure in Allied conferences, such as at Tehran in 1943 and Yalta in 1945, negotiating with Roosevelt, who was socialist-minded and admired Stalin, and Winston Churchill, who despised and distrusted him. Stalin wanted all Soviet POWs liberated by the Allies and all German soldiers captured east of the Elbe River handed over to him, and in return he would give Eastern Europe free elections. FDR believed him. Churchill did not. Roosevelt and Churchill wanted a Soviet commitment to enter the war against Japan, and Stalin agreed. Stalin's diplomatic cunning and never intending to honor his promises secured Soviet dominance in Eastern Europe, setting the stage for the Cold War. After Roosevelt's death, Stalin met Harry S. Truman, who, along with Churchill, held their Potsdam Conference. Truman, being of the same mindset as Churchill, did not trust Stalin, and Truman wanted all Americans in Soviet custody, such as downed air crews, handed over to complete the deal made with FDR. The Soviet prisoners returned to Stalin's control were killed or were sent to the gulags, as he had issued the order that there are no Soviet prisoners, only traitors and collaborators. This applied to his own son, Yakov, captured by the Germans, whom Stalin abandoned, and he would not entertain a prisoner exchange. When Stalin held his great victory parade in Red Square, not a single amputee could be seen out of the million military personnel present. That was because he sent many of them to gulags, so that they could not be seen, as their presence would have diminished the image of the perfect Soviet military man. Stalin and his policies had killed up to at least 30 million Soviet citizens before the war. He lost over 20 million during the war, and killed another 10 million or more after the war. With that depleted manpower, the lack of agricultural workers, which along with the drought that followed in 1945, this created a third famine that cost another 2 million lives by 1948. After the war, Stalin imposed communist regimes across Eastern Europe, violating promises of free elections. His control over Soviet society remained absolute, with renewed purges and repression. He supported North Korea's invasion of South Korea in 1950, but avoided direct military intervention. Stalin's paranoia intensified in his final years. The Doctors' Plot of 1953, accusing Jewish doctors of conspiring against Soviet leaders, was poised to trigger another massive purge, but Stalin died on March 5, 1953 in Moscow of a cerebral hemorrhage before it could be fully enacted. Stalin's rule left an indelible mark on the Soviet Union and the world. His policies industrialized the USSR, making it a global superpower, but at the cost of millions of lives. His reign was characterized by mass repression, forced labor, and economic policies that prioritized state control over individual well-being. Despite his role in defeating Nazi Germany, his legacy remains deeply controversial. His successors, particularly Nikita Khrushchev, a Ukrainian himself, denounced Stalin's excesses, yet Stalin's influence persisted in Soviet governance. The Cold War rivalry he helped instigate shaped global politics for decades. Ultimately, Stalin exemplified the paradox of totalitarianism, achieving national strength through brutality, leaving behind a legacy of both power and suffering. His impact continues to shape historical discourse, serving as a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked authority. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.